Now.
Great. Good morning and welcome to the Greater Indiana Clean Cities and 4th EV Workplace Charging Virtual Workshop presented by NoZone. Today's sessions aim at providing an introduction to workplace charging, while tomorrow's sessions take a closer look at installation requirements, as well as electric vehicle site assessments and planning. My name is Carrie Garvin. I am the Executive Director for Greater Indiana Clean Cities. Greater Indiana is a clean city coalition focused on advancing communities with education and resources on alternative fuel vehicles. Our mission is to advance alternative domestic fuel transportation, including energy efficient technologies across all sectors in Indiana. We are a standalone nonprofit 501c3 organization working with public and private sector members. As the first Department of Energy designated Clean City Coalition serving the state of Indiana, we continue to grow in both size and services in response to our stakeholders' needs. For 21 years, we have been assisting multiple partners such as cities, schools, utilities, fueling companies, government agencies, universities, and other nonprofit organizations with their alternative fuel transportation projects. Greater Indiana has around 80 members that work with us on collaborative opportunities, whether it is for funding opportunities, infrastructure development, or fleet deployment. Together, we host educational and networking events, fostering opportunities for partnerships between fleet and industry providers. We have several of our champion members listed today. We also have many leader and advocate stakeholders listed on our website. Their membership has helped fund our work to deploy alternative fuels and technologies throughout the state. Together, we're fueling the future of a Greater Indiana. Now, I'd like to give a warm welcome to the Deputy Mayor of Community Development for the City of Indianapolis, Jeff Bennett, who will share how the City of Indianapolis is promoting electric vehicles.
Good morning. Sorry. Wow. Good morning. Thanks, Carrie. I am glad to be able to join you for a few minutes this morning. Just to give you a brief overview about sort of the work we're doing here in Indianapolis with regard to electric vehicles and sustainability in general. It's clear that across the state and certainly here in Indianapolis that the electric vehicle era has arrived. We know that electric vehicles are no longer just the wave of the future, they're the present. They decrease greenhouse gases and our carbon footprint. In the long term, we know they save drivers money that they would otherwise have spent on gasoline. We know in the short term that electric vehicles are becoming increasingly more affordable for purchase for our residents. So this workshop and the conversations it will inspire is the first of its kind discussion that we've convened here out of Indianapolis. Some of you may know that in October 2018, Indianapolis was named one of 25 cities from across the country that are sharing in a $70 million prize to accelerate efforts to reduce carbon emissions and to prepare for the effects of climate change. And EVs play a key role in that reduction of carbon emissions. Our participation in the American Cities Climate Challenge and our partnership with the Greater Indiana Clean Cities Coalition to increase workplace charging, accessibility, and overall EV adoption across the city has resulted in this workshop opportunity to further progress towards sustainability and resilience, not just here in Indianapolis, but across the state. All of our cities were built with cars in mind. And during normal times, we would see 180,000 people or more commuting into Marion County on a normal workday. Obviously, we've all seen a decrease in commuting currently, but certainly that is going to rebound in the near future. So we will continue to work with our community partners to ensure that our neighborhoods are more accessible, walkable, and connected. But EV usage is important too, and it will increase that sustainability and resiliency of our neighborhoods, along with the improvements we may make in terms of accessibility and walkability. We understand the need for EVs, and we recognize that we'll breathe cleaner air if we drive cleaner vehicles. So the work that is taking place during this workshop is timely and important, despite the environment in which we're working today, where we can't get together in person. We're very proud to support this work and to have No Zone presented. I will close just by saying a few words about Thrive Indianapolis. So this workshop and its scheduling are a consequence of city goal setting through Thrive Indianapolis, which is the first sustainability plan in our city's history. EVs are a frequent character throughout that plan, and we have goals outlined for significantly increasing our charging infrastructure of businesses and workplaces as we examine the sustainability of our overall built environment. We set a goal in 2017 to be a carbon neutral city by 2050. And transportation compromises about a third of our carbon footprint, and EV adoption will play a vital role in reaching that goal by 2050. Two goals specifically I would highlight out of the Thrive plan. One is to create and host educational opportunities for our residents to highlight the benefits of EV ownership. So this workshop itself is a goal of Thrive. And then we have a broader goal of updating our zoning ordinance to plan for and accommodate increased use of EVs across public infrastructure and private development. So the increasing and enhancement of charging stations throughout Marion County will help us meet the goals of the Thrive plan. So I appreciate your interest, your time, and your participation in this workshop. And so thank you for being here. And I'm sorry that we can't do this in person. And I would close by saying I look forward to a time soon when we can all gather safely together in person again to discuss important issues like this. So take care, stay safe, and enjoy the conversations that take place through the workshop.
Thank you, Jeff. I echo that sentiment. I know we were wanting to do an in-person event, but you know what? We're making this work, and we appreciate you being with us today, and especially sharing all the great strides the city of Indianapolis is making in promoting electric vehicles. So thank you again for your support and for making sure that Indiana is moving in the right direction. Now I'd like to go into a few housekeeping items. Today we have 2 panel sessions on the schedule with networking breaks in between. During the networking breaks, we encourage you to visit the exhibit hall and take a look at the virtual booth. You can access the exhibit hall through the Whova platform by clicking exhibitors on the navigation bar on the left side. We also suggest taking a look at the resources section where you can find testimonial videos, Fourth's workplace charging toolkit, and worksheets developed by NREL for EV site assessments, tech, and financials. Each panel session during the 2-day workshop has a separate meeting link, which can be accessed through the agenda section of the Whova platform. We will now play a fun video of an electric vehicle driver giving their testimonial.
I've never driven an electric car. Looking at them, they just seem smaller, slower, kind of the cute, but not practical car. For this car, I expect it to be gorgeous, roomy, but slow. That's my fear, but we'll see. Here, until there's a motor in here, you don't hear anything. It just kind of glides. Yeah! Ow! Okay, so that is like a roller coaster that you're controlling. not expecting this car to handle this well, have this much control. This car feels great. Me and you should never part. This is going to be a conversation when I get home, definitely. I don't think you can test drive this car and just go back to normal. I didn't expect an electric car to accelerate that fast at all in a million years. That was amazing. The car handles great. It doesn't need my help. Even though it goes really fast, you can trust it. You feel safe. So the next upgrade is definitely is an electric vehicle. It changed everything.
Okay. So I think, Kaylee, if you're pulling up the slides again. We are seeing the presenter view. So I will go ahead and continue while she gets that loaded. For today's Meet the Experts panel, an introduction to EVs and charging stations, we will hear panelists from Forth, American Electric Power, and Rolls-Royce North America to discuss advantages of EV adoption, community readiness efforts, charging station locations and technology, available EV models, and employer-employee benefits. First, we will hear from Kelly Urich, Program Manager at Forth, followed by Jeff Lehman, Electric Transportation Program Manager at AEP, and Peyton Berg, Legal Counsel and Company Secretary for Rolls-Royce North America. All attendees are in listen-only mode and can enter any questions into the chat box. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. To start things off, we will launch a couple polls. I think Kelly is launching those polls, and then we will pass things over to Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. So you should be seeing our first poll of the morning, which is, have you ever driven an electric vehicle? And I see we have about a third of our attendees have submitted a response to the poll. So perhaps I'll give it a few more seconds, but you should be able to respond with any of the 4 options. All right, I will go ahead and end this poll and show us our results. All right, so the majority of attendees today, although that is a short number, a small number of people, have driven an electric vehicle before. That's great. I'm curious, I see a message in the chat from an attendee that maybe the poll is not working properly. If others are having issues, participating in the poll, please do let us know, and we'll try to figure out what's going on there. I will go ahead and do the second poll now really quickly. All right, so this one gets a little bit more at the topic of our conversations today and over the next 2 days. So the question is, can you estimate how many EV drivers work at your organization? Okay, so I see about 6 people have responded to this one as well. I'm thinking there might be a problem with the poll. So we're gonna go ahead and end this one again. But thank you for those of you who did respond. And then just quickly, the response from the group was that they estimate that less than 10 people at their organizations drive EVs. But a few say greater than that and unsure. Okay, well, I apologize for that seemingly technical difficulty or glitch, but thank you all for participating and for bearing with us as we move on through. Okay, so with that, I'm gonna go ahead and turn my video on so you all can see me. All right, well, good morning, everyone. I will go ahead and get us started on this panel today. So as Carrie mentioned, my name is Kelly Urick, and I'm a program manager at Forth. You can move to the next slide, please, Kaylee. So to tell you a little bit about Forth, we are a nonprofit trade association based out of Portland, Oregon, and our mission is to accelerate the adoption of clean, shared, and electric mobility. We bring together partners from across the electric transportation industry to advance this mission through transportation policy, demonstration projects, and consumer education and awareness. Next slide, please. All right, so to start us off today, I just want to give you all a look at the adoption rate that we've seen in the US for electric vehicles. So this chart shows that the growth has been fairly exponential in recent years, and maybe with the exception of 2020, we do expect that trend to continue. As of 2020, there are over 1.5 million electric vehicles registered in the US. Next slide. All right, so getting a little bit closer in and looking at just Indiana. So you're seeing similar trends in adoption. Note this chart does include some data for the first 2 quarters of 2020, which of course has been a bit of an odd year for all vehicle purchases, but not excluding electric vehicles with the pandemic and the weakened economy we find ourselves in. That said, in Indiana, you have just about 8,800 electric vehicles registered, whereas about 2/3 of those are battery electric vehicles, and the remaining are plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, also known as PHEVs. And then as far as charging stations, which of course are also a critical piece, you have just over close to 700 charging points. Next slide. All right, so very quickly, I want to take another brief step back to highlight the main differences between electric vehicles that we'll be discussing over the next couple of days. BEVs, or battery electric vehicles, are powered only by electricity that's stored in batteries. They have 0 tailpipe emissions, and a couple of examples of BEVs are pictured here: the Tesla Model 3 and the Nissan Leaf. And then plug-in hybrids, on the other hand, have electric motors that can power the car with energy stored in smaller onboard batteries, but they also have gas engines to supplement that energy. They're great for longer trips or for just longer driving styles and commuting patterns. The example that's pictured here is a RAV4 Prime, which is coming out this year, 2020. All right, next slide. All right, so then just really quickly, giving a big picture look at the charging stations, because we'll be using this terminology probably a lot over the next few days as well. So charging is broken up into 3 levels. Level 1 is your standard wall outlet. 120 volts can charge an electric vehicle. And this is going to be your slowest level of charging, but it also is an option that you might consider as an option for your employees as a workplace charging solution. Moving up from that is what we call level 2 charging. It's a bit faster. Within a day at a workplace, you can get, between 20 and 40 miles of charge per hour that you're plugged in. So this is a really great option for public charging in general, but also workplace charging in particular. And then we won't be talking much about DC fast charging installations during this workshop, but just know that it's an option that's out there, provides much faster charging rates. And then finally, and just to introduce an acronym that we use in this industry, EVSE, which stands for Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment. All right, next slide. Okay, so now on to highlight our conversation in this workshop, workplace charging. Workplace charging is important for you to consider at your organization for a number of reasons. First, it is a crucial piece of the puzzle as cities and regions take on the challenge of climate change and commit more fully to sustainability and clean air. Second, as an important employee benefit, it is a great way to attract and retain star employees. Third, workplace charging is proven in its ability to drive EV adoption through greater awareness and availability of charging infrastructure. A recent study from the US Department of Energy found that employees with EV charging are 6 times more likely to drive an EV. And then finally, workplace charging can work synergistically with fleet electrification, as fleets may be able to leverage workplace chargers outside of business hours. All right, next slide. So overall, workplace charging is a cost-effective and low-cost benefit to offer your employees. For many, it's the second most likely place for EV drivers to charge. And as adoption continues to grow beyond the early adopter phase, workplace charging will become increasingly important for apartment dwellers and residents without access to home charging. It also enables greater electrification of vehicle miles traveled. If you consider someone who drives a plug-in hybrid with, say, a 20-mile commute, if they're able to charge their car while they're at work, they've essentially doubled their electric miles driven, as opposed to potentially relying on gas to get them home. Okay, next slide. All right, so why is this important now? Of course, all of us are joining virtually today and we're all telecommuting these days. So why should I care about providing my employees with something that they can only benefit from being in an office? Well, there are lots of reasons, but I would argue that there's no better time than now to begin a workplace charging program. As we'll learn over the next few hours and into tomorrow, these programs can take time to roll out, and it's likely going to be better for your employees if you're doing things like construction projects to your work site or at your work site while no one is around to be disrupted by it. Plus, it will be an incredible benefit that employees can look forward to coming back to, because they will be coming back. We just don't know when exactly. All right, next slide. Okay, so I'm running short on my time here, so I will quickly highlight this slide, which was taken from a workplace charging toolkit that my organization, Fourth, recently created for the city of Indianapolis through the American Cities Climate Challenge. This slide is just one slide from that toolkit, and it outlines for you the overall process you'll want to consider as you implement a workplace charging program. I like to point out that the process begins and ends with your employees, from securing stakeholder buy-in from leadership, facilities managers, and employees, to creating programs and communications around how employees can and should use the chargers you've installed. We're going to dig into a lot of the specifics about what happens in the middle over the course of this workshop, so I will stop there for now. Next slide. And then finally, if you're interested in learning more or accessing the toolkit that I just mentioned, you can find it in the resources page for the workshop, or you can contact me directly if you have any follow-up questions. And with that, I will turn it back over to Carrie.
Thanks, Kelly. Always love hearing about your guys' toolkit. So I think this is, you know, it's also, there's so much information out there and resources. So I appreciate you reviewing those with us. Okay, so we are going to now move on to our next guest, which is Jeff Lehman, the Electric Transportation Program Manager at AEP. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Good morning, everybody. Thank you especially to Kelly. A lot of great information that was just provided, and appreciate you being able to join from the West Coast very early out there this morning. So thank you. So as Carrie mentioned, I'm the Electric Transportation Program Manager for AEP. So I work across our entire footprint. As you can see here, it's pretty extensive. We're a fairly large company. We work in 11 different states. And within those 11 different states, we have 7 different operating companies. So most pertinent to the discussion this morning is Indiana Michigan Power. So predominantly in Indiana, as you can see there, but also a small piece of Southwest Michigan as well. So we span a large part of the Midwest, heading up to the west as well. Lots of generation, transmission, and distribution assets, and we're very excited to be involved in this space as well, working with all of our operating companies and our customers and communities to find ways to move this space forward. Next slide, please. So workplace charging has been a very important part of my my projects, my experience at AEP, going back to 2016, 2017. And really starting to get engaged in this space. And we've approached it in many different ways and done that from a very purposeful intent to test and validate different experiences, different approaches that can be used by our customers. So starting with our deployment in Gahanna, which is a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where I'm located here. We deployed 10 ports, 5 stations, that are charge point equipment that you can see here. Pretty typical install. We found that to be quite expensive, as many others have, but it's been a great project. They've been very highly functional. But you can see what the costs per port are for that installation. So moving on from there, we wanted to develop and deploy a large project at our downtown headquarters in Columbus, Ohio. So we knew, because we had 2 different parking garages, we had a bit of a constraint in terms of electrical capacity. We were really looking at how can we develop something and deploy something that proves load management and circuit sharing as a viable option, to make sure that we have space to grow. So that was really the whole point of doing this. So what we did there was not only share panel load, share service load, we're sharing circuit load as well. And that has allowed us to really drive down the cost of installation, as you can see here. That $2,500 per port that we've experienced in our headquarters building does actually include a lot of one-time costs in terms of transformers that took place. So follow-on phases have proved to be less expensive than that. So it's been a really good proof of being able to scale a project and making sure that you aren't boxing yourself in, and finding ways to be, more cost efficient for phase 2 than you were for phase 1, et cetera. So it gives you gives you confidence in being able to add the next phase. And then lastly, a project that we've done also in Gahanna, really focused on a pivotal question of how can we make surface lot workplace charging installations much less expensive. So as you can see, we dramatically reduced the cost, but we really looked at what are the underlying pieces that go into that What are the different items of cost? In many cases, the pedestals, the posts, can be a significant cost. The concrete pads that support those pedestals are a significant cost, which is why typically, and what you see at the Gehenna 700 building, typically why those are deployed at least 2 ports to a pedestal, and put in between parking spaces so that you can sort of share that pedestal and concrete cost among 2 ports rather than having it at one. The challenge there, as a longtime serial EV driver, is that it's not an optimal experience for every single person that pulls up, unless you happen to show up at a parking space that is on the proper side of the car based on where your connector is and the type of vehicle that you have. You may need to pull that cord across your bumper, across your hood, across your trunk, try and finagle it to go under your bumper. I've had that experience too many times. I've seen it too many times, and that was another piece that we were looking to really prove, is how can we both reduce the cost and improve the customer experience as you're looking at these surface lot installations, which are very challenging. So we were able to prove that we can really put downward pressure on those costs and commoditize those types of installations. So broadly, next slide, please. What that has done is given us this ability to really put together a menu for our customers, to leverage our experience and help customers understand different options that they can take and what those options mean in terms of features, functionality, costs, etc. And pulling in the context of electricity costs, which is something that I think is very important, but we typically find that customers really inflate their expectation of what those electricity costs might be. So going from as simple as it can get on the left to as complex as it can get on the right, there are cost ramifications of doing that. In the 2 more complex equipment sets where they can collect payment, this menu is showing that the payment that is being collected is done to completely offset any electricity cost. So both in the adaptive load management and the network service provider columns that you see there, the users that are pulling up to these stations are paying. They're paying for the electricity. So whatever it costs you as an installer, as a site, they're paying it back to you just to completely offset it. But what you can see is, and this is actually pretty aggressive in terms of electricity. It's really for a workplace installation where your employees would be charging exclusively at work, which is not generally what you would anticipate. But in that situation, you can see that looking at the left, for a more simple installation that has a lot less upfront costs, those electricity costs are actually probably quite a bit lower than what you would expect. And looking at that more complicated equipment, it's just on a numbers basis. The ROI is still quite difficult, even if you're recouping the cost of electricity. So there may be situations where individual organizations want to or have to collect payment. We'll get into talking a little bit more about policy in a minute, but this is really just to hopefully broaden the horizon of what our customers are seeing, and to make sure that we can help them see approachable ways to deploy this infrastructure and this charging equipment in ways that works for them and for their employees, both for in terms of form and functionality as well as budgets. Next slide, please. So on that policy piece, this is really pivotal in our ability to stand up the programs and define the equipment, define the approach. The 3 pillars that we really needed to address were safety, productivity, and then cost to employees. So the very next level that you see from there, in terms of safety and productivity, it was critical that what we were doing was not introducing any additional safety hazards for our employees to deal with, and we were not introducing lost time of employees for using these chargers either. So those two lead then to the next decision, which is if we are serious about not introducing any additional hazards to our employees and making sure that there's zero lost time, then our employees need to be able to pull in, park, and not come back to the parking lot until they need to leave. So that means we want to be able to deploy one port for every EV driver. That's the only way to guarantee that we're not going to introduce additional hazards and we're not going to cause distractions during the day, additional need for coordination between employees, additional trips to the parking lot, things of that nature. So that then, if that's the outcome of those two pillars, leads us to equipment selection, which if we're providing a port for every driver, we can use much less expensive, much lower power equipment. So it's still level 2 equipment, as Kelly mentioned, but there's options in, what are those power levels? And lower power levels mean you can place more ports for a given electrical capacity. They're generally much less expensive. So those have, budget impacts and benefits from that perspective. Lastly, what was the cost to our employees going to be? So we started from an approach and really defined this was going to be an amenity. It was important for us to provide this amenity to help build a community of EV drivers, support those EV drivers, and help to drive adoption, awareness, and interest within our communities. So that decision, offering that as an amenity, and the fact that we are explicitly expecting our customers to charge at home, we're very clearly laying out the expectations for them that this is not intended to be your sole place of charging. You will be charging at home as well. Then leads to an analysis where you can look at, okay, are there tax implications? And every organization is going to have to do this analysis on their own. But based on how you step through these decisions, it's very likely that you will be able to quite clearly see that this is a de minimis fringe benefit in the eyes of the IRS. So again, have to do all that analysis for each organization, but that's the importance of really identifying these different pieces of policy and decision making and stepping through this decision making process. And it helps to define how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and the policies that support that. Next slide, please. So last thing I want to touch on, and hopefully I haven't gone over my time, is just to pull this back and help others that are on the call see that we have utility programs in Indiana. So Indiana Michigan Power is no exception. We have an overall program called I Am Plugged In. And specific to workplace charging, within that program, there are two different options. So customers are eligible either for a $250 per port rebate, or a 5-year revenue credit calculation period. So that's a bit of utility lingo, but essentially on the revenue credit piece, if you require or if it's easier to have a new service installed, that 5-year revenue credit calculation period will help to ensure that the costs for new service are very little and hopefully zero to our customers. So that's really the intent, is to help enable our customers and communities to start moving in this direction. I've provided some very basic guidance in terms of, in this decision as customers are thinking about it, what each option is probably best for, but we have more details there at our website, indianamichiganpower.com/I am plugged in. There's an email address that you can contact directly, and we have a team that works on that program, so that they're more than happy and very excited to talk to you and help you guys discover and consider options for moving forward. Thank you guys very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jeff. That was great. A lot of great tips for others to follow when they're considering putting in charging at their workplace. So thank you again so much for going over the projects that you guys have done and some of the best practices you gained from doing those projects. I believe our next presenter is Peyton Berg. Peyton is the legal counsel and company secretary for Rolls-Royce North America. Welcome, Peyton.
Hi, Carrie, and thanks very much, and hello to everybody out there. I think my role on this panel is really to bring this discussion down to the employee level, and talk about not only the virtues of EVs, first of all, as an EV owner, and then secondly, the value of charging your EV in the workplace while you're at work. And certainly I can attest to both of those. So I want to begin by extolling the virtues of owning an electric vehicle. So I saw the poll, and sort of a one-third. My personal experience is that in 2018, I bought a new Tesla Model 3. So similar to the car on the video, that when we drove and realized how great EVs are. And so I don't, without knowing the ages of everybody here on the Zoom call. So I'm 48 years old. So that means I was in college from 1991 to 1995. I'm sure some of you were born during those 4 years on this call. And the reason why I mention that is because when I was in high school, before I went to college, all the music I listened to was sort of the hair band genre, right? So you've got Guns N' Roses and you've got Motley Crue. And that's what I grew up listening to in high school. And then when I went to college, my freshman year in college, I heard the opening guitar chords of Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, and a bolt of lightning hit me and said, things are changing forever. And the hair band genre was firmly in the rearview mirror, and enter the grunge era that I enjoyed certainly in my 4 years in college and beyond. And the analogy I'm trying to draw there is I drove a Toyota Camry hybrid for about 10 years. It was a great car. And then I decided, as I said, in 2018 to take the plunge and go all electric. And when you drive I'll say a Tesla or a high performing EV, there's no turning back. The conclusion is inevitable that the days of gasoline powered automobiles are numbered, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I don't want to exclude the other manufacturers, because my only experience is with the Tesla Model 3, so I'm not promoting or talking against any of the other models out there, but it is a revolutionary car. I mean, for example, I've owned it for over 2 years. I've driven it for about 17,000 miles, and I have I have rotated the tires. That is the only maintenance activity that I've undertaken in over 2 years and 17,000 miles. There's one fluid in the car, and that is windshield washer fluid. So do you remember the days when you'd go to the dealer at 5,000 miles and think you're getting an oil change, and they say, oh, well, actually, you need this, 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 and this, and so that'll be $800, please. I mean, imagine a life without gas stations. Imagine a life without dealers, service centers trying to nickel and dime you to death. So it is the as I think earlier the deputy mayor said, it's the present. It is happening, and so I encourage every one of you to look seriously at an EV the next time you need a car. With that, can we put my slides up, and I can kind of get into my brief presentation about what my employer has done in relation to EVs in our workplace. And I have a plan B if I don't see it, because I can pull the slides.
Peyton, just so you know, your slide is on there. So maybe you're not seeing it on your screen, but we are seeing it in the presenter mode. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not seeing it in presenter mode. Is it the slide the picture I sent you this morning, since I can't see it, did that make it to the final slide deck?
Carrie, do you want to hop on?
Oh, I'm hearing, thank you, Aaron. they can see the slide. So is it a photo of my Tesla Model 3 charging in my Rolls-Royce parking garage as I speak to you guys right now? Is that what you guys are looking at?
Yes.
Yeah. It says, hey, Justin, how are you? Fellow board member of Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. So yes, I want to be authentic with you. And so that's my car, and that's my car charging in my workplace parking garage right now as we speak. I plugged in this morning when I came in. You'll see we have 4 EV chargers there in our parking garage, and it's actually premium parking. As you pull into our garage, the 4 spots are immediately on the right. So they're essentially the first 4 parking spots, which is a benefit I'll get into. But I just wanted to show this because I'm practicing what I'm preaching to you, and it works very well. Can we move to the next slide, please? And then if somebody out there in Zoom land could tell me.
So Peyton, we have one slide for you, your
Yep.
EV charging at Rolls-Royce.
Yep, that's great. And I can see it here on my laptop. So in the 2016 timeframe, Rolls-Royce decided for corporate sustainability issues to invest in EV charging at what has turned out to be 3 of our sites here in Indianapolis. So we have, for those of you who don't know, we have a large manufacturing facility in the Raymond and Tibbs intersection in South Indianapolis. And then we also have sort of a corporate headquarters facility, the old Brower building, South Meridian Street, just south of South Street. So those are our main sites here in Indianapolis. So we decided that we wanted to support our sustainability globally, and that resulted in partnering with ChargePoint, which is our vendor, our EV charging vendor that has a nationwide network of charging stations. It's worked very well. And we installed 8 stations in 2016, 4 at one part of our manufacturing facility, and then 4 at the other part of our manufacturing facilities. So there's 2 clusters, I'll call them, across the road from each other, but we have 2 buildings across the road from each other. And then in 2019, we added a third, I'll call them cluster of 4 chargers. So currently we have 12. And what I really want to talk about, because I use them the most, are the 4 in my previous slide at the headquarters building in our parking garage. Now, they're not open to the public. They're open only to Rolls-Royce employees because there's badged access to get into the parking garage. It has been very nice to have this amenity at Rolls-Royce. Like I already talked to you about the preferred parking. You know, when I usually get in, I have young kids, I got to get them to school. You know, I'm lucky before COVID to get in there around 9 o'clock, so I would spiral up 5 floors to find a spot. If I have my EV, I pull into, you know, if they're available, I pull into one of the 4 slots on the ground floor and walk in. So premium parking is certainly a great thing about it. I am proud to say, and this is another comment about, you know, how many of your work colleagues drive EVs. There is no question in the last 2 years that the number in our parking garage has gone up and up and up. It's been pretty fun to watch. I mean, they are, like I said, it's here and it's growing, and I have evidenced that just in the parking garage of Rolls-Royce. We are required to register our EVs because of the charging capabilities. So I asked our group property administrator, and we have 40 Rolls-Royce employees with EVs registered, which is great news. And then they got the data, they pulled my number, and I thought, since I got my car in 2018, 71 charging sessions, and for a modest $115.27. And that's another, you know, clear advantage of EVs is the money you spend on charging is a fraction of the money you would spend on gasoline driving to and from work or anywhere else. That's a fact. The fossil fuel industry doesn't like that fact, but it is nevertheless a fact. It is much cheaper to charge your EV than it is to fill up your internal combustion automobile with gas. Now, of course, I'm you know, this sounds like a utopian existence where everybody's happy and there's no conflict and everything's wonderful. I will now discuss two challenges that we've encountered, one by our own hand and one at no fault of ours. And the first one is because of the increased number of EVs, the parking spots are, I would say, generally all occupied. And then that set up a sort of mini debate. Well, are you parking your EV or are you charging your EV? And the lawyer in me would point out the signs on the parking spots that says parking for electric vehicles only, not charging for electric vehicles only. But I digress. The point is that sort of we try to regulate ourselves, the EV community, and give a priority to folks that need to charge, because some people that's where they charge their car. They have only maybe a 110 capability at home, and they rely on those chargers to get their charge and be able to commute. So we sort of have a priority to those who need to charge, and essentially if you're parked there, you better be hooked up and charging, or you may get a note on your window, which I received once when I wasn't doing so. So that prompted us to ask for more EV parking spots. And we were heading in that direction with support from Rolls-Royce until COVID hit. And of course, COVID is the other challenge that we've encountered. So like most downtown companies, you know, the number of employees driving into work has been, you know, reduced significantly, right? So like as I pulled in today, there was nobody there, right? So I plugged right in. So we are still wrestling with this. What the future will look like as far as employees commuting and the need to charge. I don't think it will result in a reduction of our capability that I have set forth today. However, it may hinder growth, but that's where we find ourselves, you know, sort of 6 months into the pandemic. That's really all that I wanted to present to you all today. And in conclusion, to sum up, I strongly encourage you to buy an EV. They're the future. They are the nirvana of automobiles. And then also charging, I would support any employers or municipalities on the call to offer EV charging in conjunction with preferred parking, even at a cost. I don't think it needs to be free, as a way to grow sustainability, fight climate change, and in my opinion, do the right thing. And Carrie, with that, that's all I had.
Thank you, Peyton. I just want to say there are several of us that appreciate the music analogy. So,
Okay, good.
So
Okay.
it went over pretty big. And it's always good to hear from a fellow, like someone who's actually an EV driver, right? So it's not only that you're trying to encourage others, but you're doing it yourself. So, and then some very good lessons learned from a workplace, implementing EV charging at the workplace. So thank you so much for going over that. Now we are going to go into our Q&A portion. So it looks like we still have a little bit of time to do that, thankfully. And so just as a reminder, I know some of you guys have been entering statements and questions into the chat box, but I also believe there's a Q&A box for you to use as well. And I do want to say to Kelly or Kaylee, if we keep seeing that encrypted message, we may just need to open up the line and let them ask their questions live. I'm not getting any questions popping up here. So I think what I'll do is I'll move on to one that we've often received is what types of businesses can take advantage of workplace charging? You know, we hear about public and private businesses. We've heard about restaurants installing charging versus an organization installing charging for their employees. So, and I guess I'll kick this over to Kelly to go ahead and review, since she did that nice overview. And so Kelly, if you want to pick that up and start talking about what you've seen and which type of businesses can take advantage of workplace charging.
Yeah, thank you,
And
Karen.
as a reminder to all the panelists, if you have not opened up your video and to join the conversation, please go ahead and do so. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, sure. So I will take a first pass at this question. It's an interesting one, I think, because if you think about how we define workplace charging, it's charging that's dedicated for employees that drive electric vehicles to work for them to be able to charge up during the day. But I think if you're trying to make the case to your employer to install workplace charging, it's also going to be really important to identify areas where those chargers could be leveraged for other purposes, whether that be to allow for the public to charge at those charging stations outside of office hours. If you are installing a charging station that has the ability to charge people to charge their cars, that's one opportunity to be able to recoup some of those costs outside of business hours. Again, as I mentioned, I think any workplace charging program could also work really well hand in hand with a fleet electrification strategy. But yeah, I would also say, and I'll just kind of put a plug for the next panel later this morning, that we are going to be highlighting a few different types and sizes of businesses that have installed workplace charging. So they'll be able to speak to their personal experiences, but we're also going to be joined by a retail presenter from Meyer, and so they will be speaking about their experience in putting in charging for their customers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much looking forward to that panel. Another thing that has typically come up, at least when Greater Indiana Clean Cities are working with a variety of our partners, is what are some of the pros and cons of networked versus non-networked chargers? And I'm actually going to kick this over to Jeff if he's still hanging out with us. Jeff, if you can hop on and show your video.
Thanks. Yeah, if you could go back to
I know,
Go ahead, Carrie.
I know you and I have talked about this in the past, but clearly not everyone on this panel was privy to that conversation. But the question is, what are some of the pros and cons of network versus non-network chargers? Yeah,
if you could go back to that menu, the customer menu that I presented earlier, that really helps to kind of lay it out. There's different functionality and being able to, restrict usage or create different groups and roles of people collecting payment, as was mentioned already on this call. Those are all things that, more expensive, more complex equipment with communication capabilities will have the ability to do. Same thing for load management. So if you have a situation where it's critically important that you're able to manage that load, to be able to integrate it with your facility, if you're dealing with constraints similar to what we saw at our headquarters building downtown, those can be very important things to consider. But again, yeah, it's really dependent upon what an organization needs and wants, what their specific situation is. And, I would hope that folks are able to take a look at kind of a business case and look at different options. Ultimately, similar to what Peyton's experience is, the more that we can find ways to deploy these assets in a way that it is more ubiquitous, that's a much better experience for drivers and provides more redundancy. So if I can deploy more ports for effectively the same cost, then it's less critical if that one port gets parked in by a truck and I can't use it that day, right? So if that's one of 20 instead of one of 2, then okay, we have some coaching that we can do with that employee, but it's not going to ruin anybody's day. So there's a lot of trade-offs that can and do happen. But yeah, the cost versus functionality especially tailoring that to the needs and wants of your organization is really the most important part.
Great, thank you. And I keep checking the the chat box and the Q&A box, and I'm not seeing any questions. So if you guys are trying to submit something and having difficulty, like just try and let us know so I make sure I get your questions answered. But we do have some other questions that we have prepared.
Hey, Carrie,
one of the questions
Kevin,
is, yeah.
Kevin, sorry to interrupt. Kevin had asked a question. I think that's what you were probably jumping off of on the networked side. So Kevin, if that addressed the question that you had, great. If not, please let us know if there's other things that we can dive into on that front for you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Another question that we have lined up is, what companies would you consider leaders in this space? And that can be anyone on this panel.
Is that in terms of organizations that are installing, or equipment manufacturers? I guess I'm uncertain.
What companies would you consider leaders in exactly what we're talking about, which is workplace charging?
Yep.
You know, I'm unaware really of any companies, at least in downtown Indianapolis, that are marketing that, at least to people outside their employee base. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll jump in. That's a great point, Peyton. Identifying workplaces that have workplace charging is actually really challenging because they don't typically show up on the plug shares of the world where you can find access to public charging, unless those workplaces decide to make them public at certain times of the day or generally. But I can say there are a number of, not surprisingly, tech companies that have made commitments to, sustainability more broadly, that do have EV charging stations installed. I can also speak to Hewlett-Packard. They were sort of an early adopter. They started putting in charging stations back in 2014, I believe. And now they have them, I think, at all of their campuses. So that's one specific example, but yeah, many of the tech companies, particularly those on the West Coast, are very likely to have charging stations. Nike, that's based here in Oregon, in Beaverton, they have a very robust workplace charging program, as well as Intel. So those are two examples in literally my backyard, but there are lots out there.
I think one thing that came to my mind, and this is Tesla specific, but at least in the upper Midwest region, obviously they must have partnered with Meyer, because when I supercharge, typically it is at a Meyer location. So there must be some sort of access agreement between Tesla and Meyer in this area. So I would think Meyer is a pretty progressive company in that space. And I think a panelist on the next panel is the sustainability director for Meyer and can speak to those agreements. So I would throw Meyer on the list, at least in this region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that, Peyton. Very good point. Very good plug also for the next panel. We do have a question from a municipality. They asked, do any municipal EV charging providers use these chargers as a profit center?
I can speak to my personal experience of municipalities that I know, particularly again here in Oregon, that do offer charging. The answer would be no. I'm not aware of any that do use the charging stations as a means to make profit or in that case, even recoup costs. In a lot of cases, they're considering this to be an employee benefit, or in more cases, just a public benefit that does not align with charging to charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to bring that back, I mean, that's a great point, Kelly. And part of what I have in that menu kind of illustrates why that's the case. If you go with a network service provider, you end up, even if you're recouping all of the costs of your electricity, you're still paying ongoing fees, which may be totally justified depending on what you want to do with data, load management, et cetera, like we already talked about. But it's exceedingly difficult to make that a revenue source. It's even difficult to, not difficult. It's when you start to try and recoup the costs, you get into a situation where there's just a natural ceiling on what you'll be able to charge customers or employees before they just self-select out. Because we have the unique and fantastic thing about EVs is that electricity is ubiquitous, first of all, and our homes all have electricity, and most of us can all charge at our homes, even if it's just with that 120 volt outlet that Kelly mentioned. If you sleep 8 hours a day and you drive less than 40 hours, if you drive less than 40 miles a day, which is the vast majority of people in this country, just the time that you're sleeping is enough time to charge and recoup the energy that you use every day for transportation. And that, the cost of that at your home is in the vicinity of about 10 cents per kilowatt hour. So as an operator or a municipality or a public charging site, as you start to go above those costs, there's just no incentive for people to use those because they have viable alternatives that are much less expensive. So you start to see utilization rates go down, which means you're charging more per kilowatt hour or per minute, but you have less people using it. So it's a very difficult trade-off to manage because there are viable, compelling alternatives to just workplace, such as home, et cetera.
I would only add that in Indianapolis, we are just coming out of an effort. We had a electric vehicle ride sharing program called Blue Indy, which tried to operate, but eventually was unsuccessful. So we have many multi-charger parking spots in really premium areas downtown and sort of in the surrounding area of the city. And if the deputy mayor is still on, I'd love to hear an update on what the city plans to do with those charging stations, because they're already wired and they're already operational. And certainly as an EV owner, I'm hopeful that perhaps there's a balance, as Jeff was talking about, between retaining those chargers as parking spots and then perhaps revenue derived from it for a growing EV community. But I realize that's just here in Indianapolis and not anywhere else, probably.
Yeah, thank you. Hopefully that covered Sean's question. And there's a Matt Bloom who's been trying to send us the messages, but it's all showing up encrypted. So Matt, I don't know if you can go ahead and type in your questions into the Q&A box, and then that way we will try to get to it.
Hey, Carrie, while we're waiting, I was just going to add one thing, which is in thinking about this as a profit center, I think there's a natural inclination for folks, but it's, like we've all discussed, it's exceedingly difficult to think about these as a profit center or revenue source. It's just very, very difficult unless you find yourself in a place where demand is extremely insensitive to price, and that's because electricity is ubiquitous. We normally don't have those situations. But also wanted to throw some recognition to another champion member of Greater Indiana Clean Cities, Duke Energy, who is really doing a lot of good work in leading in this workplace space. So they've committed to deploy workplace charging at all or most of their facilities. and they're doing a fantastic job leading the way in
Yeah.
the utility space as well.
Yes, I would agree. Okay, Matt, I got your question. So we will do Matt's question and then we'll wrap up here. How important is local EV hardware manufacturing to the Midwest? I was, yeah, that's kind of a doozy. So any of you guys can jump in on that one.
I guess I would only throw out there that hopefully it is important as we try to revitalize the automotive supply chain and grow it toward the manufacture of electric vehicles versus traditional vehicles. So I don't, so certainly I hope it's a priority going forward. It's my best answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If somebody else wanted to hop in. It looks like there's a Libertyville plant opening. That was also part of the question. So yeah, I think that the whole premise is just as much as can be offered, the better, right? And I know that sometimes the deliveries, especially now with everything that's been going on, deliveries for both vehicles and equipment have been delayed, whether it's attributed to the manufacturing and then the shipment of it. But I know that that's been happening quite a bit as well. So hopefully we get that can be improved as well as